Welcome to AGAPE Social Justice, where we focus on love, truth, and justice. Today's topic is one that I want you to stop what you're doing and tune in. Trust me, you do not want to miss this episode. Today's topic is something that keeps me up at night, and if I'm honest, for the last year or 2 years has risen to the top of my social justice advocacy list. I am here today with one of Oakland County's, maybe even now she's known statewide, one of our top advocates for poverty and homelessness. And so I am looking forward to having a conversation with Kimber Bishop Yankee. Kimber, welcome for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you wear many, many hats. And I remember probably about a year and a half ago, I received a call and I didn't know what to do. I had never really done advocacy in this area before in terms of helping people who found themselves without a home. And your name came up over and over and over. And they said, you have to meet Kimber and talk to her. And so I want you to just start out a little bit telling us about who you are. How did you get to where you are? I remember you coming to our school, I think, for Kids Empowered. So tell our listening audience who you are.
Yeah, so I am the founder of Kids Empowered. I've been doing that for 22 years, and we teach kids self-esteem, social skills, how to deal with bullying, unfriendly friends, and classmates. Mm-hmm. And I've done that for 22 years. At the same time I started my business, I did start a nonprofit. My business was called Girls Empowered, and my nonprofit was called Girls Matter. Mm. And I did conferences for girls and moms for about 8 years or so. And then I had someone from church say, hey, Kimber, we give out grants to organizations, nonprofits that are working with kids in poverty. I would like you to apply for one. Mm. So I started offering some programs to schools that had kids who were struggling with poverty. And I always volunteered for the Warming Center, which is in Royal Oak. 10 weeks out of the year, about 10 churches get together and they offer an overnight dinner, breakfast, and a place to sleep. And somebody knew I did that. So they called me up and they said, Kimber, and this was during the polar vortex, which I think was about 3.5 or maybe 4 years ago. And they said, I have a 22-year-old former student who's sleeping in her car and she needs a place to go. Can you help her? And I thought, sure, that shouldn't be too hard. And so then I started calling all the services to try to get Sam help. And I got very upset because we did not get phone calls back. We were told to call numbers, which told us to call other numbers. And in one place I was trying to get her shelter spot, we had called there day after day. And I finally said, what are the chances that she's going to get a spot? And they're like, we can't tell you that. And so that really upset me. And I said, well, let me talk to our manager. And the manager said, well, we're short-staffed today. I don't even know if we have a bed. And that really was upsetting. I thought, oh my gosh, all these people that are in crisis and they're depending on this organization to help them, and they don't even know if they had a bed. So I called Christine Gregg, who at the time was our Democratic minority leader. And I said, Chris, we've got a problem in Oakland County. We don't have enough services. And she agreed that nobody had really paid attention to that issue for years, which we can see all over the country nationally, that this is a real problem. And so she said, bring me a group of people to talk about this. I'll bring you a group of elected officials. And that happened. And at that meeting, Representative Carter stood up and said, I want to start a caucus on poverty and homelessness in the House, and asked Senator Baer to start one in the Senate, which they have. And it's the first bicameral caucus on poverty and homelessness in the country, which is very exciting. And then Representative Carter said, Kimber, would you help with a local task force? And I agreed, because I don't complain unless I'm going to help. And then I saw on Facebook, I was the chair of this task force. So I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So I just started holding monthly meetings, and we would have different organizations come in and share what was, happening. And I was trying to figure out what could we do as a group of volunteers to help with this issue. One of the nonprofits in the high school, Pontiac High School, told me that she was still giving kids cans of ravioli for dinner. And I was just in disbelief. Like, we have all these food banks. How can that be? How can kids still be hungry? And she said, well, Kimber, some of our families don't have cars. The food banks have odd hours. They only let you come once a month. That's not enough to feed a family. So I decided that I was going to test out a fresh fruit and veggie delivery to 25 families that didn't have cars on March 20th, 2020. And I partnered with a fabulous organization called Micah 6 in Pontiac, which focuses on fresh fruits and veggies. And 2 weeks before our date is when we were all shut down for the pandemic. So I called Coleman, the founder, and I said, Coleman, we just need to go as big as possible, as many families as possible, as much food as possible. And he agreed. So in the end, we had 250 families. We had 50 volunteers. We had food for a month. And it was an amazing day. We raised $6,000. And if you can imagine, in those first 2 weeks, everybody's scared. Grocery stores were letting you only buy one item at a time. So we had people going to stores all over the place, dropping off food on my porch. A rabbi worked with his distributor to get us eggs and milk. I mean, it was really a beautiful thing. Everybody came together, and we delivered food that day. And then I found out that Oakland University, Jennifer Lucarelli, was organizing all the food banks. So I called her and said, hey, I've got 50 volunteers. Can we join you? And so we started delivering food every Saturday. We packed up the food, loaded it into the cars. And the first week we delivered, one of the volunteers called me and said, Kimber, there's a baby sleeping in a dresser drawer, which I did find out is an okay place to sleep. I thought it wasn't, but it actually is. Jennifer Lucarelli told me. She's a health professor. And so, but the mom wanted a crib for her baby. So the volunteer said, do you think we can get her a crib? And I was like, I'm sure we can. Within a week, we had a crib. The volunteer went and set it up. And then all of a sudden, we started delivering furniture. And everybody was shut down. So we had this group of volunteers who would mask up, go pick up donated furniture, go into people's homes, and I could not believe how many beds, children's beds, beddings that we were delivering. We had a child sleeping on a pool float, number of children sleeping on the floor. So what happened is, after a year of doing this, I had a nonprofit that was like collecting the funds for me, and then I would submit the invoices, and they said, Kimber, like, this is, not our mission. We had no idea this pandemic would be going on for so long. Like, you need to figure out. And then I realized, well, I have a nonprofit. So I started utilizing my nonprofit. And over the last 3 years, we have bought 5 mobile homes for homeless families because there's no place for them to go. So if you have poor credit, you have evictions, you don't have money, like, there's no place. So we bought the mobile homes. We've delivered about 20,000 food deliveries.
Wow.
I don't even know how many furniture, clothing. I mean, we deliver paperwork, and I've spent over $100,000 on hotel rooms to keep people out of the cold.
Now let's process this for a minute, because that's a lot. That's a lot of work, and you had an amazing number of volunteers to do this, which is kind of unheard of, honestly. So walk us through the process of what this looks like. So you get a call, someone calls you and says, okay, someone's in need. Fast forward to today, what does the process look like now? Do you still have the same number of volunteers? Do you still have the Saturday food delivery going on?
Yep. In the beginning, the food delivery was through my COVID response. So the guys that created that really created a beautiful thing, because what it did was it had all the families in need and then all the volunteers, and then you could schedule food deliveries. And eventually Lighthouse took it over. So we are still delivering to 175 families. It's now every other week, not every week. So every other week. And then right now I have 7 hotel rooms with homeless families, because there's no place for them to go. And so not much has changed, except that I've learned a lot about all the barriers people face in getting help. And that needs to change.
Well, let's talk about some of those barriers, because I will tell you, as I've been thrust into this now with helping a couple of individuals, I'm floored. I think most people do not know how challenging it is when you call for help. So that magic number that they tell everybody to dial, it gives everybody pretty much the same list. My experience has been that sometimes there are organizations on the list who think they shouldn't be on the list, or you'll call organizations who are devoted to this type of work, but then they don't return your call. They're overwhelmed. The wait list is 2 weeks to 2 months. Like, how do you navigate this? How does a person who contacts you go from homelessness to actually getting settled and having a stable life? Kind of fill in those gaps for us.
Yeah, well, there's no clear process, and that's part of the problem. So if they end up with us, that probably means they've called everybody and they just haven't gotten the help, and somehow they find us. And we're very small, so obviously I won't be able to take on the real big problem.
Right.
But, we basically, the first thing I do is try to get them into a hotel so that they have a place to stay. And then we try to get them food. And then every family is different. So everybody has different needs. So for example, you might have a family that has, evictions on their record, or they have a felony. And so we connect them to resources like Lakeshore Legal. But they are also trying to work it where they're calling landlords, and then we're also calling landlords. And if we can't get them if we can't find an organization that will help with the deposit and first month's rent, we'll pay that. Okay. But a lot of it is just that basic, like on the ground, like we print off applications, we'll pay application fees, because this is what keeps people from being able to get places, because they don't have a computer, they don't have a printer, they don't have a car to go drop off the application. So we're helping them do the groundwork. And that's really what needs to happen. Is we have a lot of organizations that give out numbers, but the people that are in need don't have the tools to actually go through the process. They don't have a great phone to do the application right on their phone. So we do a lot of like hand holding and finagling of different pieces to make it happen.
Right. One of the things that I thought about too while you were talking, I mean, we have a high illiteracy rate in some of our cities. And so now as I'm thinking about this process and you're talking, I wonder how many people are even confronted with this and don't follow through because they can't even read the application and they don't have anyone who's helping them.
Yeah.
I think for me, I was probably most surprised that some of these organizations that exist don't actually have caseworkers or case managers who actually walk people through this step by step by step. I found myself trying to fill in that gap to be a case manager for people, and I'm fumbling my way through, right? Has that been the typical experience? Is this something new, like post-pandemic, or has it always been this way?
Well, I don't know about always, but I do know that there's a lot of missing pieces to the puzzle. So so people are not getting the complete help they need to manage this system. And I have also found that the literacy issue is a problem. And also people, get burned out, like they get frustrated, so they no longer trust the system. So when you're asking them to fill out another application, hey, I'm trying to connect you to this resource and they need this application filled out, sometimes they're like, I've already done it. I've already called them. I didn't get any help from them. And so then they're very resistant to doing it. So they've lost faith in the system that's supposed to be helping them.
Right. You know, I also think about a young lady I was helping. She is in her early 20s, has a son who's a toddler, right? You and I both know this young lady who we've helped. And in her case, she needed a driver's license. Didn't know how to drive, needed birth certificates, needed a social security card, like needed so many basic things that most people didn't have. And thankfully we knew of an organization we could contact and say, can you help walk her through this process? But do you find that many people don't even have the basics? Is everybody kind of starting out at the same
Yeah,
level?
I mean, trying to get birth certificates, trying to get driver's license, I mean, these are huge hurdles for people. So I just, I shared with you that I just got a call yesterday from a person that we deliver food to, and she was calling about her neighbor that was downstairs who has been without electricity for 6 weeks, no heat. He has an injury, so he has a work injury, so he's not able to work, and he has no food. And she called me and started crying on the phone and said, can please somebody help him? And I put him in the hotel for the weekend. And then on Monday, I've already made contact with an organization. We're going to try to get his DTE bill, started paying on that. He owes $1,000.
Okay.
And, he, he didn't know who to go to.
Right.
And that's that's part of the problem, is that when you're in poverty, you don't have those connections. So a lot of us have somebody that we can call and say, can you help me out? Or a family member. But when everyone around you is also struggling, you don't have that connection. And so the beautiful thing about what has come out of the work we're doing, and that's thanks to my COVID response, is that we've connected volunteers right with families. And so some of our volunteers are now like their mentor. And they're doing things totally on their own. Like there's no way. I've had over 1,000 people be involved since the pandemic started.
Okay.
And there's no way I can even possibly know all the things that are being done, because I have volunteers that have taken it and run with it. And that's what we want. We want the families we're helping to have a support system, to have somebody that they can call and say, hey, I have a problem and I need some help.
Right.
And then the volunteers will call me if they can't figure it out.
Right. You know, I see this situation twofold, and you correct me if I'm wrong. It feels like part of what we need to do is to focus on the crisis, right? There's a fire, we need to put it out, and we need to figure out how to manage the situation. But on the other hand, I feel like we should simultaneously also focus on big picture in terms of creating systemic change. And that's where I feel like you and I probably get the most resistance from people, because they aren't thinking beyond the Band-Aid of today, right? In terms of trying to figure out how we can help the masses. And so I want to talk a little bit about how do we shift, or not even shift, how do we just partner, right, as we're putting out the fires, but also work toward creating systemic change. Can you tell us some of the things you've already started doing so that we could get to that point?
Yeah, so one of the problems is that the federal dollars that help people come through HUD, and HUD has defined homelessness as living on the streets, being in a car, in a shelter, or a hotel paid for by a shelter. So if you pay for a hotel for somebody, that person is not homeless. Or if a neighbor says, hey, I'll let you sleep on my couch for the week, that person is not homeless. So that's a problem in itself. But then also, basically, we bought a mobile home for a vet and his family. And when he called the vet organizations, they said, call us when you're sleeping in your car and then we can help you. And I mean, those words stung him so badly. Like, I've served my country and you're telling me, see, I'll get emotional about this.
Right.
You're telling me I have to be sleeping in my car. My children have to be sleeping. He has a 20-year-old autistic son, who is unable, he needs 24/7 care. And so that's why we bought him a mobile home, because there was no alternatives. So one is, I'm going to our Congress people. You and I are talking to Congresswoman Stevens next week. I would like HUD to maybe not change that definition, because we definitely need a sort of a priority of people that are on the street, right? But we need a streaming fund that is for people who are about to get evicted. Like, let's catch them before they're on the streets. In October alone, there were almost 1,000 evictions just in Southfield, Oak Park, and Pontiac.
So where are these people going?
So 1,000 evictions filed. So most likely they all will be getting evicted. Where those people are going, I mean, so many people are being evicted right now. I mean, that's how, so in the United States, in our community, we have a housing shortage.
Right.
And so people are sleeping in other people's homes. You know, we have people that have 2 and 3 families in people's homes. We have, I know of a gentleman that has called me. There are 8 people sleeping in a 3-bedroom apartment in Southfield, and it's a house, and there's a woman sleeping in the garage with a space heater.
Wow.
And they are paying rent. They're paying $850 a month to be in that home. 3 bedrooms, 8 people, not related. So I'm trying to help him find housing for those people. So we need to change the definition. So HUD needs to give some creative funding. We need to find an organization that will help people, what I'm calling ready to rent. Okay. So credit scores, do I have evictions? Do I have a felony? And then what's my budget? And then we need to have an organization that has relationships with landlords and knows, okay, that landlord's willing to overlook credit scores or willing to look evictions. We don't have correct information. Right. So we're sending people out in crisis and giving them wrong information.
Yes. So I remember, I think it was maybe a month or so ago, you had, actually it was Veterans Day. You had an event and you had pretty much all of the organizations there who, in some form provide a service to people, right? And I remember saying there, please stop giving out the same list to people. And we know that there are a number of organizations on there that don't help. We know that there are apartments who no longer service Section 8 or whatever type of unit you're looking for. And I almost felt when I was there, like, do they get it? Like, I don't feel like there's a sense of urgency. I know people care, right? Mm-hmm. I know they're in a helping profession and that, they're in it for good reasons. But help me understand why the house is on fire, right? And there's no sense of urgency.
Because I think people in our community think that you call a number and you get the help. And I think sometimes the help seems like it's happening, but people don't understand all the pieces involved. And that's why, as chair of the Oakland County Task Force on Poverty and Homelessness, that's why one of the missions is to educate people and create awareness about the barriers, because people aren't aware of them. And another mission is to inform the legislators, here are things that you can change. And then a third one is to get everyday people like you and me involved in this process, because I believe it's up to us to make the change. And we need to go to our elected officials and say, we want change. And right now they're not hearing that. They don't hear this. So they only hear about, like gasoline's too high or stuff like that. So we need to let them know. We need to motivate more people to let their elected officials know, no, this is important. We want people to be in housing. We want children not to have to worry about what they're going to have, if they're going to have food for dinner or not, or the heat's going to get cut off.
Right. And let's just be really clear to the listening audience, right? Those people we're talking about are like you and I, not the people who are in this day in and day out, because one, they're struggling trying to figure out how to find employment. Some of them need childcare, and without the childcare, they can't get to the employment. If they don't have transportation, they can't get there. I mean, there's a multitude of issues they're facing. And then let's incorporate medical conditions. And God forbid that they've experienced multiple forms of trauma. And what I've seen is that when whether it's a senior citizen or a person who's 20 years old and they've experienced trauma, their ability to be able to manage 15, 20 different steps, right? For what feels like everything they have to do, it's unbearable. Like they have no time to go out and be an advocate for themselves in a sense. And so I've tried to say to people, the responsibility is ours. Right? What happened to that love our neighbor, right? And I think that we've gotten so comfortable in our own lives. And even for people who've grown up in situations where they've experienced poverty because they no longer experience, they're so far removed from it. It's like it's not really right there in the forefront of their mind. It's not something they typically think about on a daily basis. So what do you think we can do? I mean, this is something that kind of keeps me up at night, but what do you think we can do for people like you and I to get them more engaged?
Yeah, so I think that, they certainly can volunteer with us, Kids Empowered on the Move. But I think that getting connected to an organization that has boots on the ground, and to start delivering food to people in need, start delivering Christmas to people in need, and then they will see that they can do something. They have the power to make a difference in somebody's life. And I can tell you that I have people that love, they are so thrilled to be helping. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel that they have power. I have power to help. I'm not helpless to this situation. And so I think that the more of us that get involved, that's where the change is going to be, because we're going to expect the same treatment that we expect if we needed help for the people that are in need.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because that's just absolutely true. If we wouldn't want to go through it ourselves, we wouldn't want our children or other relatives to go through it. We shouldn't expect anyone else to go through it. So I certainly appreciate you sharing that. I know there's probably 15 other scenarios that we could paint today. So I have to have you come back one day and we can catch up and figure out how it's going, share with the listening audience where we got in terms of reaching out to elected officials.
Awesome. Sounds great.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all for tuning in with us today. We'll keep you abreast in terms of what happens next, but please go to Kids Empowered on the Move.
Yes.
And make sure that you sign up to volunteer, and we'll see you next time.